there's been some discussions with the auditor, but you're asking
So
Bede
Bede's
and
to
the
speak?
team-
Bede?
Yeah, Bede
Okay.
and the team to review
Okay.
the plan.
Pete, fire away, mate.
Transport, Your Worship, and councillors. So, look, we did have given some thought to this and so on, and I think that the way forward here with transport is you have a program of work, and that program of work has been audited as part of the consultation document and the long-term plan. There will be an emphasis of matter over the LTP because of the uncertainty that attaches to transport. And that the funding, yes, we've got some indicative funding, but in actual fact, we don't know the final funding until probably September or October. And so the advice that officers would provide to you to consider when you're deliberating on this is that that program of work remains largely as it is at present, but that you, when you get your final funding envelope in September, it comes back and it is assessed at that point. So that's now there were some amendments that wanted to introduce some projects that were not in the program, and we think the approach there should be to note that they will be brought back rather like these with advice for you to consider once we've had an opportunity. And that gives you the chance, first of all, it means we get certainty about the funding. The program has been tested and by audit, and in a number of areas, and Lynette may be able to speak to this, your program of work in terms of what we start to do for this season will already be largely in play. So we'd urge those thoughts. We're happy to take questions, but put those as preparatory comments. Keeping in mind, of course, what the auditor said today around materiality and movements, transport being a big portfolio, a big area, it won't take much to start moving it, but we put those comments
So
out.
can you just clarify, does that mean that nothing could be changed until 1 July next year, or September you would look at rephasing and rejigging the program based on the funding from central government?
I think you'd be looking at September when you would take the opportunity to go and say, right now we have this certainty over our funding, and Lynette would bring back, and the team saying this is, would bring it back and say, here's where we are now, this is the funding, this is what we've got, and we know with some certainty where we are at.
Yeah.
And during that time, I mean, obviously, costings and so on will get, the closer you get, the more visibility you get. But it would be, or September or October, whenever they give us the final NZTA numbers.
So what you're saying, Bede, we could be doing a hell of a lot of work for absolutely no reason, no reward at all.
That is a risk.
Yeah.
Today you could make significant movements around your portfolio, only to find that when you get your final funding envelope that you have to re-look at it.
And where was audit's advice on this to you?
I think audit would be pretty comfortable with us pretty much leaving it as it is, as the program as it was positioned, and bringing it back when you had your final funding envelope, because they recognise the uncertainty of the funding, which is why they're putting that emphasis of matter across the top. So they would be quite comfortable with that, I believe.
Fair point, that's good to hear. So I've got it all done. We've got a couple of questions. Sarah, then Mel, then Vic.
Thanks. So 2 questions, key ones. If in September everything comes back to us that's already in the LTP with its confirmed or, confirmed funding or not from Waka Kotahi, and we decided to go ahead with projects anyway, even if we didn't have specific additional funding from Waka Kotahi, would it be possible then still to introduce new funding for the projects that weren't in the LTP that we have asked for new funding for this time? It only applies, because my understanding is it applies to shifting funding around that's already in the LTP. So there are 2 projects specifically that are amendments today, so Simeon Street and Te Aratai, that currently aren't listed in the LTP, but are both shovel ready. So
We've got council resolution as well.
So when you say shovel ready, paid for by shovel ready or ready?
No, they are ready to go,
Ready
for shovels, tender ready, so they don't take any sort of staff design resource or anything.
Yeah, so new money, essentially new money would be into the annual plan. You'd have to consider those in the annual plan. But if it's already a project within the program, you could look at it in terms of the priorities and start to consider what are the priorities you want
Yeah.
within the program. Because of course at that time you'll have more certainty about your funding.
Okay. And the other one is in September, if due to the lack of Waka Kotahi funding, we're looking at making quite large changes to our capital program when it comes to transport, would we have to reconsult?
I think that speaks in a way to the uncertainty about trying to make decisions when you've got a program. We would have to run the significance over those decisions and assess how they were impacted as you went through looking at them, rather than speculating at this point about what might or might not happen, given the funding and what priorities you might have.
This makes it difficult for us to make a decision today on whether we would debate them today if we don't know whether we would need to reconsult.
Well, it depends then, I suppose, on what, it depends on what was intended, what you might do, how much extra funding might be needed. It is difficult without knowing the specifics of the arrangement and the funding to actually make a decision or advise you about what we should do when we don't know what funding will be available in September from Kotahi.
So my proposal, Mr Mayor, through you, would be that if there was a will today not to debate the things that were already in there but leave it till September, like the Mayor's rec originally, I would suggest that maybe we did that, but that we voted on the couple of ones in there that are new money today to allow those to be debated and voted on.
So do we want
That, I'm just saying that if that's what people wanted to do, that's what I would propose. I'm not saying.
Okay, Melanie? Victoria?
Seek some clarity then on, what Sarah's just mentioned about those that require new money. And specifically, I want to talk about the Wheels to Wings project and materiality in respect of new money. The issue that I'm really struggling with here is we were told by staff that the long-term plan used the old budgets for Wheels to Wings, which was up to 22 million, and that the revised new costs weren't available in time for when it went out for consultation. And at the time it went out for consultation, the public were expecting 51% in funding. Just bear with me here, there is a question. Now we've been told, and it's in the finance papers for tomorrow, that the cost of the project could be up to 35 million. So from the public's perspective, at the time that the consultation document was out, they thought that the council was contributing 10 million. We're now faced with the prospect of the council having to contribute 34 million. So the difference is 24 million, which is material in anybody's books. And that's new money that we have to find. I'm really struggling with this materiality aspect, both from the funding part, but also from the public, because they didn't know that we were going to have to find another $24 million to support this. And I would have imagined that there would have been a huge outcry if they had have known that. So for us to continue with it surely means that there's a material change. It's just not making sense.
Do you want me to talk to that? So that goes to what Bede said just before, really, about the fact that when we've given you the advice on Wheels to Wings, it has been a range of advice, and we don't know the answer yet. Now, I know that's not ideal, but we are working through that. That's why we suggest. That's why.
Which answer don't you know? Just let it finish. Sorry?
So we don't know. We have given you a range on the anticipated cost that the project could be. And we don't know the exact answer, whether it's we put that between 27 and 34 million. And if it's 27, it's a different impact. So that goes to the advice around the difficulty of making a decision until you have the advice to make the decision.
I accept that, but if the amendment fails, then there are no further decision gateways for this project, and in which case there's a material difference.
Except we do have to report back at the NLTP, and I forgot that one when I was
So,
talking to you
because when I
earlier.
asked you
Yeah,
earlier today, I said, is there another funding gateway for this project if the amendment fails today? And you said to me, no, there is not. So that if the amendment fails, then this project will proceed at the cost of up to 34 million for the public.
No, I didn't
So
say
you're now
that. I said unless the budget is more. So if that amendment fails and it can be built for the budget, there is no funding gateway. There is no gateway to come back. But we have always had to report back. We will always have to report back on the outcomes of the NLTF.
So the budget that you're talking about, if there's no increase to the budget, which budget?
It's the budget that's on the books now, the 22 million.
Of which the public thought that we'd only be paying 10.
There's still a $22 million budget on
Provision.
on the books. The revenue is the revenue from NZTA and the outcomes of the NZTA revenue assumptions will come back to council for the whole program.
But I assume that would still require a gateway if you've had a $22 million project with an assumption of 10 million revenue. The revenue it doesn't eventuate. You'd need to find another 10 million to replace. So that would have to come back to council to find that 10 million somewhere.
But through the chair, that wasn't the assumption. Yeah.
Okay.
So if we don't get that, then that
so if you
that
don't
is-
get if you
yeah.
don't get whatever the assumption was, it was
if we don't
So there's
get whatever the assumption was, then yes.
The difference
Yes.
between the assumption that they've adopted and the public's assumption of 51%.
Right. Okay. You can think. Yep. Jake.
Assuming that the budget goes over and assuming that we don't get the revenue and there's a quantum that we have to make up, the usual process for that, but because it's in our LTP, we could top that up through extra borrowing, or at what point would we need to go reconsult? What I'm trying to ask is there any obstacles for us to top this project up if it's required, given it's already in the LTP?
We would report back with options on,
I know there'll be
on what to do.
options, but is there any barrier to top up? There'll be other options. Yeah, I'm just
It'd be an annual
wanting
plan or
to get the answer.
One at a time. One at a time.
no, I don't.
So what you're saying, I think if through you, Your Worship, as I understand the question you're saying, let's say we don't get the money that we had assumed, it comes in, we need to find that. Can council resolve to go and borrow that and top it up in order to complete the
And to
project?
what quantum can we do that before it triggers a consultation process?
Yeah.
2 million, I assume. 2 million, I assume, would be fine. Is 10 the same? Is 20 the same?
Yeah, it is, because you may have unders in other budgets. There may be priorities and movements. It really becomes, it's quite difficult for us because we don't know what budget we're going to be dealing with,
Right.
and what the amount will be, and whether you might reprioritise something.
Cool.
So that's the until we know our envelope, we're really sort of hedging our bets because we just don't know what advice we would be giving you in terms of the priorities you might choose to adopt and what money you might have to play with.
Okay.
And the costings as well, so that you know exactly how much
So we
you
can
need.
definitely do it. Whether we need to consult is a live question, and it depends on a lot of different things.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
It's through the. I mean, often that would be through the annual plan. Sorry.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, Mr. Mayor, the project won't, if we don't have the full amount of funding, neither myself nor the CE would be signing off on the contract if we don't have the funding first secured by coming back through council. So it can't. We can't raise a purchase order and kick a contract off if we don't have full funding.
No, I mean, I just mean, short of going to an annual plan, what's our power within the cycle?
Well, council may choose, with the options that come back, it may choose to look at other programs within the transport sector which may have come in under. And that's the information we don't have, because you don't know the status of some of those jobs between now and September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yanni, please.
Just trying to understand, worst case scenario, we get a big report back in September that says, here's all the priorities, here's the current projects, here's the new ones, and the deficit is this. We can go out for a special consultative procedure around putting in extra money to fund those projects, right? Like we did with the stadium.
So
we
you
don't
can
need to wait for an annual plan.
You can, that's right. Or you might decide you can reprioritise, or you might look at the program and go, actually, by the time, but when we go out for the annual plan and conclude, it won't have much of a flow-on effect anyway. So we consult in terms of timing because of work that you've already got on the go. So there are a number of options that are available to you. We just don't know which one we'd recommend until we arrive with the fiscal envelope.
And just to check, like the risk is if we don't do that, then we basically put the whole LTP at jeopardy with audit, needing more time to audit, which means we can't strike a rate. So all the other stuff we've worked on today just gets possibly lost.
That's through you. That's right. I mean, we do need to be careful here that when you have a big transport budget and program, you start making changes inside it. It won't take much to move the materiality. That's quite correct, Councillor.
We've got more questions. But we just wanted to have a 5-minute break, but there's some questions. So do people want to ask questions first?
We'll do the questions. Sorry, there's Victoria, then Tyler.
We've got.
Just trying to catch up with everything that's been said. Supplementary to some of the other questions, Lynette, up until now, transport staff have been reluctant to put Wheels to Wings in the same category as every other transport project for review following the GPS. So when we had the spreadsheet that came to the council table a couple of weeks back, and the recommendation was to hold, defer, review after the GPS, but that same recommendation was not made for Wheels to Wings, are you now saying that that is your recommendation for Wheels to Wings?
I didn't put the amendments in the process. I've just provided advice against the amendments. That's what we've been doing. The whole program is, and the audit advice has evolved. So the audit advice is, as Bede has just explained it. And that is against the whole of the transport program.
Okay, so let me go back then to the audit advice and back to Bede, and this follows up from my first conversation my question that I don't think was answered around materiality. So our job here at this table is all about risk, and if I was a betting person, there are two things that I think are going to happen, and I think we're all going to agree on it, and that is that there will be no money for Wheels to Wings, and the budget for the project will increase from 22 million towards the 34 or 35, because let's face it, every other transport and cycleway project has blown out. So now, if we know those things are likely to happen from a risk perspective, and the project, if it comes back to us after the GPS, recognising that this is an MCR, recognising that it's a political hot potato, recognising the numbers that are around this table and who have always voted to support the project and will continue to do so, how does that then affect the materiality aspect that we will still have to find up to another $20 million for this project that the public otherwise didn't think we were going to have to find? That's the bit that I'm still really stuck on, because I think we know what's going to happen.
It's only relevant if we have to rate for it. If they get it from within existing budgets, you don't have
Where's
to.
the money going to come
I
from?
think if we...
The program.
Someone talk to that materiality
Yeah.
to help me understand?
Right.